Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. Sir Keir Starmer and the French President Emmanuel Macron have agreed on a new one-in, one-out scheme to help tackle the migrant crisis in the English Channel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu leaves Washington tonight without a ceasefire deal, saying he's hoping for a temporary 60-day ceasefire in Gaza, but a permanent end to the war will only happen if Hamas lays down its arms. Parliament's intelligence watchdog has warned that the threat of physical attacks by Iran on people living in the UK has significantly increased. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages of the newspapers as they come into us. It's time to see what's making the headlines with Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator, James Heal, and political journalist Zoe Grunewald. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. The Metro leads with Sir Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron's one-in, one-out pilot scheme to return 50 Channel migrants a week. On a day, 250 arrive illegally. The Daily Telegraph also covers the migrant crisis, adding the French president blamed Brexit for the Channel migrant crisis, as he says the British people had been sold a lie. The deal is also on the front of the Express, where it says the Prime Minister has been accused of caving in to France. The Mail leads with the three-word headline, "What a joke." The Eye says the migrant swap deal will start in a matter of weeks, and also says President Macron has blamed Brexit for the small boats crisis. And the one-in, one-out deal is also on the front of The Guardian. The front of The Times says that GPs will be told to stop issuing millions of sick notes that sign people off work and instead send them to job coaches or the gym. The Mirror leads on the ongoing story around MasterChef's Greg Wallace. Meanwhile, the Daily Star leads on Donald Trump praising the president of Liberia's English, even though that's the West African nation's official first language. The Sun reports that TV chef Gino D'Acampo is to start a new life in Australia. And we are joined tonight by Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator, James Heal, and political journalist Zoe Grunewald. Welcome to you both. Well, let's start with migration, illegal migration, and the announcements of President Macron and Sir Keir Starmer today. This one in, one out. The Metro have done a little twist on that. It's one in, one doubt.
Yeah, well, this is the tone that is actually being struck across quite a few of the papers, actually. There are a lot of people concerned that neither Macron nor Starmer were willing to put an exact number on how many migrants would be accepted. There was also the fact that they're talking about around 50 a week in a trial, but on this particular day, 250 arrived alone. So it's really, for many people, feels like a drop in the ocean when it comes to actually addressing the migrant crisis. I think what is significant about this is actually more the tone, because I think both Starmer and Macron have acknowledged that you need a raft of solutions when it comes to dealing with the issue of the rising asylum seekers and irregular migration. International cooperation is one of those, and what we had for the past, almost decade is a real kind of isolationist policy from the UK, where they didn't actually want to cooperate that much post-Brexit with France, with the EU. Johnson was very dismissive of France. Liz Truss was pretty dismissive as well. Sunak showed a bit of a thaw in those relations, but this is a real concerted effort by Starmer to look to dealing with this issue across the Channel. And I think that is really what should be taken away from this. Not that this is suddenly going to be a silver bullet to the migrant crisis. I don't think either leader are trying to suggest that. But I think what it shows is that to go forward, these countries are acknowledging that this has to be solved together in the round, not as an island, not with an isolationist foreign policy.
James, what are the issues?
Well, I think there's three big question marks over this currently. Number one, of course, as Zoe says there, is the scale in terms of this. 50 arriving, 50 being sent back, and of course this is actually a time when that means effectively 17 in for one out. In terms of the scale, you've got 20,000 who've arrived here already this year, 44,000 since Labour came to office. So the scale is the big question mark, first of all. Second thing is the timing. You know, he's talking about within weeks. Now, we know with all these migration issues, these tend to be much long-term, much more seismic than kind of quick fixes within a fortnight or so. So the question is actually, given we're approaching the summer months, and we're going to have months and months of arrivals in the hottest time of the year, that could be very important given how lack of facilities there are in the system. And the third point is the most important for me, which is the sign-off. You know, this isn't just between the UK and France. This needs to be signed off by the European Commission. And if they don't sign it off, because, of course, Greece and Italy, are they going to want to go along with this deal? No, I don't think they are, because it's going to go back onto the continent. So given all of that, there are big questions mark about this deal. And, of course, that's a year of effort. This is a really long-term, difficult solution. And I fear it's going to be, as the Metro says, one in, one down.
And so in terms of the rest of the European Union, do you suspect that Macron has gone ahead and done this single-handedly, or would he have consulted with European partners beforehand? Because this is quite a big move to go out on your own.
Yes. You think there would be some consultation? I mean, you know, he is very much kind of one of the leading figures in wanting to keep the European Union together and having that consensus. But we do know there was quite a lot of briefing to the papers prior to this about doubts from those countries that James pointed to about, you know, what would this mean for them? And, you know, would this increase the number of migrants they would have to take? Because obviously France and the rest of the EU, they have, you know, a certain amount that they take, and there's a variant of factors that address that. I think there's also this, but I think what is significant, though, is that for a while it did feel like, or at least there was a sense from certain politicians that Macron was trying to almost punish the UK for Brexit. You know, there was a suggestion that he actually didn't want to work with us on this issue because it was a lesson to other countries about why you don't want to leave the European Union. That diplomacy, that help will get taken away. But what we see here in this picture on the front of the Telegraph of Macron and Starmer kind of hand in hand, and they hugged outside Downing Street. I think
that awkward handshake.
The awkward handshake. Yes, yeah. But it is significant because I think it shows you that actually, you know, other EU states are also dealing with this issue, and I think they've come to recognise that actually you have to all work together. And clearly, Starmer's made it very, very clear that he wants to work with the EU, not just on dealing with migration, but also on trade, you know, on the face of international aggression, and therefore a new partnership is potentially being formed.
And it's going to be lost today because obviously migration is so important for voters, one of the top three concerns, but also there's been some good stuff on defence, nuclear cooperation. We're going to be working together in terms of nuclear armaments, in terms of what our policy is going to be. It's updating the 2010 Lancaster House Agreement. And I think that makes sense. You know, we're similar size economic powers, military powers, and given the threats from Russia and China as well, it makes sense to kind of pool our strength when it comes to different areas.
But Macron did mention the B word, didn't he? And he says that, as the Telegraph explains, it's because of the Brexit lies that's to blame for the crisis with migration.
Well, I think, you know, he very much appeals to his own domestic political base, and he's someone who is, so he says, has always presented himself as sort of an aspirant emperor of Europe, and he's very much a European leader. And he has no need to sell the needs of Brexit, you know, and I suspect Keir Starmer is happy for that as well, because it pins it on the Tories. And, you know, Starmer is clearly comfortable moving into kind of post-Brexit world. So the EU reset, Nick Thomas-Symonds was out there a lot. So I think that you know, obviously this is the thing that splashes the right-wing press, but it's just, you know, par for the course for a French president.
Zoe, do you think there's a tone of, OK, you've learnt your lesson now, so we'll bring you in from the cold?
Yeah, I mean, it could be interpreted that way. I think it's more just that we now have, you know, I think there's plenty of things you can criticise Keir Starmer about, and many across the political spectrum do. But I think the voters tend to feel that on particularly aligning closer with the EU, that's actually pretty in step with public opinion. I think people, they don't necessarily want to rehash the Brexit debate. I don't think there's a massive appetite for rejoining, at least not in the near future, although I'm sure a lot of people would say they'd want to see it eventually. But closer relations, for all the reasons James just said, it's not just about trade, it's also about the security threats we face. It's also about the economic damage we've suffered as a result of leaving those, you know, that big trade union, big trading bloc. So, you know, I think because Starmer has gone in, not with the kind of attitude of many Tory leaders of this is our Brexit, you know, the Johnsonite, this is our Brexit, so we have to see it through. That has softened quite a few European leaders.
I just add, it's really interesting, the reaction to this from the Conservatives, which they use the exact same language with the EU reset, sort of, you know, surrender deal, they use the same phraseology. And actually, the truth is, they're quite nuised on this issue. And the reason why Kip Malthouse, Robert Jenrick, two Tory MPs, both proposed similar things, one in, one out, 2-3 years ago, and I think they're being a bit quiet on it tonight. It's partly because, you know, the eye's been taken up a run with, because it is something that I think the Sunak government would have done, the Starmer government would have done, and it's because it's something that is a small step in trying to solve this big issue.
Okay, let's move on to a different story on the front page of The Times. This crackdown to cure UK of sick note epidemic. GPs are going to be persuaded not to give sick notes so easily, instead to refer people to job coaches or the gym. Zoe?
Yeah, this is a story we see trotted out actually quite a lot in recent times. I think there has been a consideration about what it is people can do to take responsibility for their own healthcare. We know this is a big push from this Labour government. They want to see a more preventative healthcare approach. They want people to feel empowered to look after their health, and they don't want to see so much, you know, people turning up at acute care. They want it to be more kind of holistic and in the community. And specifically, this is also this concern that the Labour government have about people leaving the workforce due to ill health. So this move towards socially prescribing, so that is things like, rather than, for example, getting a prescription for maybe antidepressants or something like that, you might have a doctor say to you, I'm really making this very reductive, but, you know, they might say, join a gym, or let's go speak to a job coach, or try and find the issues that might be causing some of that ill health. I think a lot of people would appreciate that those things do work in the round, but ultimately, when you have an under-resourced NHS, you have a lack of community-focused healthcare, you have huge waiting lists, you have very, very poor underfunded mental health. You can't just say social prescribing is going to fix things. You know, people do actually need medical treatment as well, and you know, you can say a lot of things about why sickness has gone up in this country, but we do have a lot of people who are on NHS waiting lists and do genuinely need treatment. So yes, prevention is a key part of this, but I think also people do need a functioning NHS that treats them when they're sick.
James, you've got about 20 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that number of sick notes have jumped from 5.3 million in 2015 to 11 million now just points to the issue. And I think this is a particularly UK phenomenon. We are now literally the sick man of Europe in terms of the sign-off. And that's what's going to be so key, is that most of these sign-offs come from mental health illness rather than physical. So I think that ought to be addressed. And obviously there's different things that you can do, as Zoe's been talking about.
OK, James and Zoe, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up, we'll be discussing this story on the front of the Mirror, on the ongoing story around MasterChef's Greg Wallace. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
All alcohol products, not just wine, will have labels warning of liver disease and the link to fatal cancers.
He's crazy.
It's an industry worth around €14 billion a year. That's why Italy sees this Irish plan as such a threat.
It's always instructive and occasionally entertaining to hear what Donald Trump has to say on the issue of Brexit.
She's got her own way of doing it, that's okay.
The job takes me to every corner of this island.
The rioting stemmed from a horrific daytime stabbing attack at a primary school in the city centre.
The scale of the rioting and the destruction it caused is pretty much unprecedented here in Dublin.
Jerry, any comment on the judge's decisions? Do you feel vindicated, Jerry? This is the end, the somewhat chaotic end, of a 52-day trial.
Micheál Martin could be set to head back to government with the Taoiseach Simon Harris.
Are you confident that you can now return as Taoiseach?
I'm cautiously optimistic and excited.
A mystery press conference hastily called. Leo Varadkar strode out and didn't disappoint.
I am resigning as President and Leader of Fine Gael effective today.
The people here sometimes feel they're somewhat neglected by the Irish government, to the extent that this place is sometimes known as the Forgotten County.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks, but none have ever been found.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland. Sky News, get the full story first.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK? This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Zoe and James, taking us through the papers. We're going to look at the front page of The Guardian now, and this story regarding the resident doctors' pay claim of 29%, which the British Medical Association's new chair, Dr. Tom Dolphin, says is reasonable and easily affordable for the NHS. Zoe.
Yeah, so they obviously we know that junior doctors have put strikes back on the table because they want a higher figure of pay, which they say will make up for the real terms loss of earnings that they've suffered since 2008. We know that when Labour came into power, West Streeting managed to quell the junior doctor strikes. They offered a pay rise, but of course there was always this sense that actually it was just, you know, there was a feeling that actually they would want more because their pay had been so repressed for quite so many years. And there is a real question as to whether the Labour have said that they're not going to put pay on the table. They've talked about maybe conditions, maybe looking at pensions. I saw that reported as well in the papers. But realistically, what the government are going to be thinking is if they do offer another pay rise to junior doctors, are they going to have a whole other set of rows on their hand from other public bodies who also want to see pay rises? And as we know, they keep talking about there's no money in the public purse. So the question of being able to fund these and keep the public on side is quite tricky.
James, they're not going to do that, are they? And also, public sympathy with resident doctors has presumably run out at this point.
Yes, there was some polling this week by the Good Growth Foundation, which shows now that, unlike during the Sunak years, when about 2 to 1 of the public supported the junior doctors, the resident doctors, now that's completely inversed, and actually it's 2 to 1 are against further pay demands. And when you have language like this in such sort of intransigent, inflexible terms, saying, well, we're going to just do this because it's from 2008, ignoring, of course, the fact that everyone's wages, including us journalists, have gone down since 2008, been repressed. The fact is that they've chosen that figure specifically because that was the point where the NHS had many, many pay increases over that time, and they've tried to fix on that one number. And you can tell the frustration from West Streeting. You know, he got into office, gave them a 22% pay rise, and of course, I think Labour were a bit naive about how much goodwill that would generate. There is no currency that is as short-term as gratitude in politics. And actually, they banked that, and then they're coming back for more. And that's why you're seeing people like Robert Winston quitting the BMA in disgust at the behaviour. He thinks that the trade union leaders are completely out of control. And that's why West Streeting is trying to sensibly find a compromise. And so there's a story in the Telegraph as well, in which he talks about the fact that now consultants are lobbying him to readdress the pension balance, because pensions are so big, pension contributions, that money should go up front, because otherwise they're getting taxed too much on pensions. So it's been acting as a disincentive. So there are some ways around this, but we see the BMA's leadership. It's not surprised that people like Lord Winston are critiquing it.
So we take us to the Mirror. Greg Wallace sacked by the BBC.
Yes, so this is about the report into Greg Wallace's behaviour. We know this has been ongoing for a long time, but particularly the BBC boss, Claire Powell, was alleged to have said in a letter to him, I just do not have confidence that you can change. And this is really a testament to an investigation that went into behaviour, the amount of people who might have put in complaints about him.
But just to say that investigation we haven't seen.
We haven't seen it, no.
Yet. That hasn't been put in the public domain.
Yeah,
and also Greg Wallace is saying that he was exonerated from many of the most serious allegations.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, you know, this is just more trouble for the BBC. We see again and again examples of people who have been alleged to have behaved badly, have multiple people come out with allegations against them, and the behaviour has been going on for years and has been known to various people up the chain. And I think the BBC really, you know, how many more stories can it take where we are discussing this and asking what went wrong, where were the lines of accountability?
And still allegations at this point. Because of time, let's move to the Daily Star, James, and President Trump. I don't know what the phrase for worse than putting your foot in it, but anyway, he's done that, hasn't he?
Well, yeah, he seems to have a permanent case of foot-in-mouth syndrome. I mean, what Donald Trump has done is he was talking to the president of Liberia. I really enjoyed all this sort of foreign leaders being sent to the White House for some various sort of ritual degrading punishment, cruel and unusual torture, because he went there and we obviously seen the Zelensky scenes and what the South African president went through, and then Donald Trump stood there publicly on camera and praised his having very good English. And, of course, English is the language of Liberia, and the sort of poor president sort of mumbled and stumbled through it all. But it was just another example of Donald Trump's unorthodox approach to world affairs.
Yes, unorthodox, that's an interesting
That's a very good use of English word, you know.
But it's the fact that he kept going and kept insisting, well, where did you learn English from?
I mean, it's just always hard to tell with Trump if it's just deeply incompetent or deeply offensive, and which he's trying to go for when he does things like that. You know, is it?
Why not both?
Why not both? I mean, maybe that's just how you have to conclude.
Zoe and James, thank you very much for taking us through the papers. We'll see you at the top of the 11.